I was sleeping peacefully, thinking I had already covered most of the essential rankings for this game, until I stumbled upon this. Yep. Turns out people had been waiting all this time for a ranking like this, and since I never imagined any sane person would actually care about it, I never even thought of making a video about it. But clearly, I was wrong. So I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. Now, one thing I should mention before we begin is that this weapon ranking is based only on this specific version of the game. Just because a weapon was powerful in previous titles doesn't mean it deserves a high spot here. Number 5, Fists and Kicks. So at number 5, we have the Mighty Fists. Yeah, I know, it's not a blade or a fancy sword, but sometimes all you really need is a good punch. There are 2 reasons I decided to include Fists and Kicks in this ranking. First, I wanted the video to be complete and cover every possible option. Second, there are some cool mechanics and tips about using fists and kicks that I thought were worth sharing. In my experience, very few players ever set their weapons aside and fight barehanded. It's rare, but fists and kicks actually have some interesting advantages. For example, if you're trying to fill up an enemy's stun bar, fists and kicks are the best tools for the job. No weapon in the game fills the stun bar as effectively. Also, when you fight barehanded, your rage bar builds up significantly faster than when you're using a weapon, especially when using kicks, which are surprisingly effective in this regard. Here's a pro tip. Nothing builds your rage bar as fast as a good kick, so don't sleep on it. Kicking enemies might just blow your mind. Make sure to use it. If we summarize everything, advantages: builds enemy stun bar faster than any weapon. Fills your rage bar more quickly, especially when using kicks. Kicks have the ability to knock enemies backward. In addition to that, if you freeze an enemy and then kick them, you can shatter them into pieces. Available right from the beginning of the game. Disadvantages: much lower damage output compared to actual weapons. No skill tree or runic attacks. Not suitable for fighting large groups of enemies. Completely useless against flying or distant enemies. Number 4, Blades of Chaos.
No, God! No, God, please, no! No!
You might have expected the blades to rank higher than 4th place, given how integral these weapons are to the game's identity and how deeply rooted they are in our memories from past games. It's almost impossible to imagine the game without them. However, as I mentioned at the start, this ranking is based solely on the weapon's merit and performance in this particular version of the game, not on its popularity, or the power it had in previous series. If I were ranking weapons in the Greek series of the game, I would undoubtedly place the blades at number 1 without hesitation. But in the 2 most recent versions, we have to admit that the blades aren't as powerful as they were before and have been significantly nerfed. The Blades of Chaos no longer hold the same strength they once did, and at higher difficulties, killing bosses with them becomes nearly impossible. They're not the same weapon that could effortlessly deal with any boss or enemy. If you pay attention, you'll notice that even the fluid combos and smooth gameplay they once offered are now a far cry from what they used to be. This decrease in maneuverability might be due to the camera angle or the rising prominence of newer weapons. Advantages: highly effective against groups of weak enemies. The speed and circular attacks of the blades make them great for dealing with crowds, particularly weaker enemies. Against stronger enemies, however, they're less effective. Effective against enemies with ice or frost attributes. These weapons shine against cold-based enemies. High attack speed. The blades offer very fast attacks, which is useful for clearing out enemies quickly. Accessible early in the game, you get the blades right at the start of your journey, making them versatile from the beginning. Tactical attacks: the blades have several powerful tactical moves. For example, the Scorched Earth move, which most players use to quickly deal with bosses. Personally, I took down about 99% of the DLC enemies using just this move, as it's surprisingly strong. Another useful move is Chaotic Rampage, which, though not something I used often, many players swear by it for effective attacks. These two tactical moves should definitely be considered as major positives for the blades. Disadvantages: low damage at higher difficulties. The blade's damage output becomes significantly underwhelming, especially on higher difficulty settings. Ineffective against enemies with fire attributes, they don't perform well against fire-based enemies. Less satisfying to use compared to their Greek counterparts. While the blades were incredibly smooth and satisfying to use in the Greek versions of the game, their usage in the recent installments feels less enjoyable. The lack of fluidity and finesse that made them iconic in earlier games is apparent now. Number 3, the Blade of Olympus. The Blade of Olympus was the weapon that ended the war between the Titans and the gods. In terms of lore and backstory, it has earned numerous titles including Titan Slayer and God Slayer. However, in practical gameplay, it doesn't feel as powerful as it should, at least from my perspective when playing on the highest difficulty. This doesn't mean the weapon is weak by any means. In fact, if you lower the difficulty level even slightly, you'll notice that killing regular enemies becomes as easy as drinking water. And with every swing of this blade, enemies practically fall like leaves off a tree. Personally, I appreciate the developers for bringing this weapon back into the game. A lot of time and effort has gone into its animation and design, and when wielding it, you can truly feel its weight in your hands. Every time you shoot its projectile, it clears the path like a shotgun blast, and whenever you successfully kill an enemy, a portion of your rage bar is replenished, which encourages aggressive play. If you time your parry correctly, a portion of your rage bar will also be replenished. However, there is one small issue that you might also encounter. When using the blade, the screen turns excessively red, and the visual appeal of the weapon's design gets overshadowed by this overpowering red hue. While it makes sense for the screen to turn red during rage mode, the intensity of the red is a bit too much, drowning out the weapon's intricate design. Advantages: the highest damage among all weapons. Enemies with shields can't block its attacks. As you know, shielded enemies resist every weapon and prevent you from landing hits, but against the heavy blows of the Blade of Olympus, their shields can't hold up and are destroyed. Can launch powerful, accurate, and long-range projectiles. Practically any point in the game's environment is within its attack range. The projectiles are extremely powerful and have a long range, so they shouldn't be underestimated. The Blade of Olympus can break through any type of shield that covers an enemy's health bar, regardless of whether it's made of ice, fire, or any other element. Very effective in one-on-one battles against slow enemies, as you can focus and control the pace of the battle. The heavy nature of the weapon and its slow strikes become more manageable in these fights. It greatly increases your resistance against elemental attacks from enemies, such as ice, fire, and more. Disadvantages: the weapon's attacks are very slow, and this becomes a problem when facing fast enemies and bosses like the Valkyrie Queen. No skill tree or runic attacks, limiting its versatility. It becomes available very late in the game, after completing the DLC and the main game. The parry window is small, and unlike other weapons, you can't adjust the parry window by switching shields. With the Blade of Olympus, there's a default parry window that cannot be changed. The only way to increase this window is by using an item called Rod of Deflection, which can multiply your parry window. Unlike shields that you can keep up all the time, the Blade of Olympus can only be used for a short moment to block, not for steady defense. Due to the rage mechanic, it has a time limit for use and cannot be used infinitely. It drains the rage bar. Number 2, Draupnir Spear. The Draupnir Spear is the weapon that most reminds Kratos of his homeland, Greece. While its mechanics might seem new to players who are just getting into the series, this spear is actually heavily inspired by a weapon from previous games called the Arms of Sparta. The Draupnir Spear borrows a lot of its moves and combat style from the Arms of Sparta. It's not the focus of this video to make a detailed comparison, but I want to emphasize that the Draupnir spear owes much of its existence to the arms of Sparta. I've even included some videos that showcase the similarities between these two weapons, so you can clearly see what I mean. What truly sets this weapon apart and makes it a standout competitor is its ability to harness various elemental powers. This unique feature allows for a variety of builds, providing players with a lot of flexibility in combat. If you want to learn more about the power and abilities of this weapon, check out my top 10 God of War Ragnarok tips video, where I explain it in full detail. Advantages. Ability to harness and control all elements. One of the most important powers of this weapon is its ability to use a wide range of elements, including fire, ice, poison, and even elements you haven't encountered before. Not only can you use these elements, but you can also cause explosions of these elements to deal massive damage to your enemies. It has accurate and long-range attacks. This weapon is better than the axe for ranged combat for two reasons. First, its accuracy and range are significantly better than the axe, and second, it reloads and can be used consecutively much faster, making it more effective for ranged attacks. High speed of strikes and attacks. The Draupnir spear delivers fast attacks, which is useful for quickly overwhelming enemies, extremely effective at filling the stun bar. The weapon's heavy attacks help fill the stun bar of enemies, making it easier to stagger them and deliver finishing blows. Great for different types of builds. Since the Draupnir spear gives access to all elements, you can create unique builds, such as a poison build or one with Lunda's armor set, which boosts damage against enemies affected by poison. Effective against both single enemies and groups. Its versatility makes it great for taking down both individual foes and large groups of enemies. Disadvantages. Available late in the game, this weapon becomes accessible only in the second half of the game. Somewhat tricky to use. The Draupnir spear requires a bit of finesse, so it may not be ideal for newer players. Number 1. Leviathan Axe. The Leviathan Axe is a precious gift from Kratos' wife, Faye, and holds not only sentimental value but also immense combat value. Before playing the most recent 2 installments, I never thought a new weapon would become this beloved by me. Sometimes during battles, I find myself repeatedly choosing it over other weapons, which is a testament to the developer's understanding of players and the sheer power of this weapon. This axe strikes an incredible balance between damage and speed, making it extremely user-friendly and effective. It's so well designed and efficient that it's hard to find a player who doesn't use it against bosses and powerful enemies. The mechanic of throwing the axe and summoning it back into Kratos' hand makes it even more appealing, transforming what could be a dull and lifeless gameplay experience into something dynamic. This seemingly simple mechanic has become a cornerstone of the gameplay, and once you get used to it, it's hard to let go of the Leviathan axe. Advantages: incredibly user-friendly and efficient. The Leviathan axe is smooth and highly effective in combat, perfect for one-on-one battles, especially against bosses or enemies with a lot of health where dueling requires precision and control. Great damage output. The damage is well balanced with its speed, making it a reliable weapon for various combat situations. Effective against enemies with fire attributes. It works excellently against fire-based enemies. Has ranged attack capability. Although not as good as the spear, it still provides effective ranged combat. Available early in the game, you get the Leviathan axe early on, making it an essential tool from the start of your journey. Disadvantages: not ideal for enemies with ice or frost attributes. The Leviathan axe struggles against enemies with cold or ice-related properties. May not be as effective in group battles. It may not perform as well when facing large groups of enemies compared to some other weapons. That's it for today's video. By the way, thank you all for helping us reach 1,000 subscribers. Without your support, this channel wouldn't be where it is today. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.